Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
The midnight of August 14th and 15th, 1947 is forever etched into history. The midnight with extreme chaos, fear, and terror. Families would take all of their important belongings and valuable items and leave their homes. The dead bodies and detached limbs could be seen on the road and in the canals. It looked like a war zone. This was the partition of India, 1947, and when Pakistan and India legally came into existence. The partition was a turning point in history due to how it displaced millions of families, how it set the boundaries for 3 important countries, and how it sparked multiple conflicts between India and Pakistan.
If one should understand how India came to be, one must understand how each state banded together against one common enemy, colonization. Trade with India was very important to Europeans such as the Portuguese and the British, but pirates and criminals on the route made trade very difficult and expensive. The Portuguese were putting lots of effort into avoiding these pirates. Behind the Portuguese, the British followed by founding the East India Company to trade with India. The British then, with permission from local rulers, bought land and started trading. The British then overthrew the Nawab of Bengal, a title given to the hereditary monarch of Bengal, and installed a puppet government. The East India Company began to grow until eventually full control of India would be transferred to the British Crown. Now, as we get into why Great Britain wanted to split India, we must look at what happened a few years back. World War II, the deadliest war in history. Great Britain was in a lot of debt from the war, and because of this, they didn't have the money and funds to keep control of India. Most scholars today emphasize the partition was neither an inescapable consequence of irreconcilable differences between Muslim and Hindu populations, nor an inevitable political maneuver by the British following decades of divide and rule. Rather, a complex interplay of factors, including rising communal tensions in the 1930s, political choices made by elites at both national and provincial levels, the impact of the Second World War, and the widespread breakdown of law and order following the Great Calcutta Killing in 1946, are important to consider as factors. All these factors eventually led to the decision that would change the course of history for India and Pakistan.
British lawyer Sir Cyril Radcliffe drew the border for India, Pakistan, and at the time, East Pakistan. It is important to note that Sir Cyril Radcliffe did not have any knowledge of the geography of the Indian subcontinent. This is important because the lines were not based on geography, but on the religious identities of each state in India, since many people didn't want to be a religious minority in their nation. The Indian subcontinent was divided very roughly into a central and southern part, where Hindus were the majority, and into a northwestern and northeastern part, which is mostly Muslim. What is interesting is the amount of maps there are regarding the partition. Sir Cyril Radcliffe only had 5 weeks to draw the borders. Sir Cyril Radcliffe later wrote that it would have taken years to settle on a proper boundary, and that is because this method of drawing the line conceals that within these districts there are sizable communities of all religions.
Finally, after all the borders were drawn, on August 14, 1947, the country of Pakistan would gain independence. A day later, the country of India would follow. At the start, it would be a time of pride for the men and women living in their countries, but in a short period of time, it would turn violent and bloody. The former British provinces of Punjab and Bengal felt this violence the most, having their states chopped in half. Unfortunately, many people didn't want to live in the country they were currently living in, mainly due to religious reasons. This prompted many civilians to leave everything they knew at their old homes and make the trip to the other side of the now India-Pakistan or India-Bangladesh border. When partition survivor Baljit Dhillon Vikram Singh was interviewed by the Stanford Center of South Asian Studies.
It seemed like the middle of the night, my mother waking up and saying, my father coming in and saying, "Oh, we heard on the radio that Lahore is going to be in Pakistan. So we need to leave. Then I heard conversations, nothing will happen. Doesn't matter if it's in Pakistan. We can stay. Then I heard more discussions about, oh, my uncle in Firozpur has said, no, you better leave because there may be trouble brewing. So I just remember being woken up, and the other vivid picture is the walls were very thick in the house, and my mother was taking the bricks out of the walls, and 2 or 3 bricks, because there must have been a safe or something in there. And she said, everyone bring the jewelry and all the valuables and let's put it in there. And then I remember the bricks being put back into the wall. She said, because I know we are going to come back.
Unfortunately, Mrs. Singh's family would never return back home, and instead would have a tiny amount of compensation, 2 bulls, and a very tiny amount of land that was very hard to farm crops on. Many people, just like Mrs. Singh, would have a similar experience in the partition. Private armies starting riots would make crossing the border even more dangerous. Of the people interviewed, many would first hear of the information through radios and village meetings, but no one would ever comprehend how violent the partition would be.
The effects of the partition of India would cause many conflicts between India and Pakistan, particularly concerning the state of Jammu and Kashmir. For over 70 years, India and Pakistan have fought over Jammu and Kashmir, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. Both countries wanted to absorb it within their borders. Neither of them has succeeded in doing so entirely. 3 wars were fought for control of Kashmir: the War of 1947-48, the War of 1965, and the Kargil War. The partition also created West and East Pakistan, 2 non-contiguous territories that were different in terms of language, ethnicity, and culture. In 1971, East Pakistani guerrilla forces supported by India fought with the Pakistani army, resulting in an open war between India and Pakistan. This resulted in the creation of the independent state of Bangladesh. Bangladesh was admitted to the United Nations in 1974. Separately, China has increasingly waded and stepped up its own border dispute with India, waded into the volatile region. These post-partition events have left lasting impacts on the relationships between India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, shaping and reshaping the region post-1947. The gravest impact, however, has been on ordinary people, who are often left out of the history textbooks.